Entriss Online by David J. Peterson. Chapter 1. Grand Magus Mandorf. Mandorf rolled across the cave floor like a tumbleweed in a hurricane. He reached out, desperately grasping for anything that could slow him, right up until he smashed against a wall. The impact made his vision blurry, and he remained still for a breath. Almost a breath. Desperate shouts from his motley group meant it was starting over again. Mandorf crawled to a nearby stalagmite that should be wide enough. Hopefully. An undulating red light flooded the cavern, growing brighter with each passing second. The nerve-wracking blare of 100 discordant horns swallowed his teammates' cries. The sound became unbearable as light flashed around him. Waves of heat rose from the ground, and exposed tatters of his robe began to smolder. He tried blowing on them as if they were birthday candles. Just a few more seconds, and the light would pass. He drew in the robes and patted away the smoke. "Any second now," he whispered. 3, 2, 1. Shit. The light continued blasting his rocky shield. It hadn't moved on. He shouted, "That thing knows I'm here! A little help!" The raw heat was too much for the stalagmite, and the edges began cracking. He willed himself thinner, which didn't work. Twisting aside, every time a small shard of rock broke away was equally useless. The heat was killing him. Mandorf squeezed his eyes shut and waited for the inevitable. The obnoxious blaring sound faded, and he opened an eye. The throbbing red light was dim. He wasn't dead. Actually, he was better than not dead. Someone, some hero, had been adept enough to cast a healing spell on Mandorf while distracting the beast. Thank you, Jules. He pushed himself up for a better view. Across the great breadth of the cavern was an enormous obsidian golem. The creature stood on 4 of its muscular arms, the other 4 reaching out as if for a hug. A really bad hug. A continuous blast of red-hot light shot from its mouth, moving steadily around the cave like a deadly searchlight. When the fiery attack ended, the monster lowered itself to the ground, and Centipede skittered on all 8 arms. There were no eyes or ears on its circular stone head, just the enormous mouth that looked like the entrance of a cave you didn't want to explore. The thick, rocky maw opened and closed as it gasped for breath. The golem was almost dead. "He's done attacking! All in!" he cried, trying to rally his troops. Silence. No one was in. Smoldering remains of 14 champions lay scattered around the cave floor. He shook his head and sighed. It was the first time anyone had encountered this monster, and a little strategy would have made this a clean fight. He had tried to lead, but only a few had listened. One brave idiot was pancake flat under the beast's large palm, because rushing in before the group made sense. Still, what had he expected from a barbarian named YOLO? The only one who had come through was his friend, Priestess Jules. Her healing spells had kept everyone else alive through their foolishness, and now she was gone. She must have cast sacrifice before dying, giving the last of her health to Mandorf so he could finish this. He had enough power, but did he have enough time? He couldn't cast any of the 7 basic spells in his wizard's arsenal. It would take 5 minutes before his mana regenerated enough to attack with even the weakest spell. There was only one way to end this. The War Staff of Antolon. Antolon's staff could cast 1 special spell every 30 minutes. It was powerful enough to finish the golem, but required direct contact, which was dangerous for a wizard wearing cloth armor. The spell wouldn't be ready for another 45 seconds, but as long as the monster was catching its breath, there was still a chance that the golem reared back on 4 arms and let loose its blaring scream. A geyser of burning red light shot from its mouth, striking the far end of the cave. The blast slowly made its way toward him. 30 seconds felt like an eternity. He waited until the beam was almost close enough to singe his sleeve. With a deep breath, Mandorf grasped his polished oak staff and ran. The creature had sensed his movement. The blast of fury and fire closed in faster. 20 seconds. Just 20 seconds more. The volcanic nightmare that spewed from the golem's mouth shook the ground. His blue silk robes billowed around him as his thong-sandaled feet stumbled over uneven stone. His mouth went dry as he circled the cave, death racing his heart with every painful beat. 10 seconds. He wouldn't make it. He had to make it. Mandorf cursed with every step. Why couldn't his staff shoot lightning bolts or a stream of fire? The spell should have been something he could cast from the other side of the cave. Wizards had flimsy cloth armor. They weren't supposed to get within whacking distance. The golem's mouth was huge up close, and it trailed his every step. Mandorf had to attack now, or the beam would destroy him. There was no time to check if the spell was ready. He sprinted straight at the monster and leapt into the air, raising his staff high overhead. This ends here. He swung down, jamming the end into the golem's maw as he cast the shattering. This ends now. Time slowed as Mandorf dropped to the ground. The red beam fizzled out as the creature reached for him. He slipped through all four hands, each grasping with the dexterity of a toddler chasing bubbles. Mandorf's landing was pure superhero, one knee resting on the cave floor as he spread his arms wide. Pale light emanated from his weapon, filling the cave with its cold radiance. He took a breath. A breath. That meant he'd lived. He looked up with a confident smirk. The golem fell back and screamed as gray cracks spread across its body. It shook violently, splintering into 1,000 pieces that exploded from its corpse. The cave erupted in cheers as the dead came back to life. He shakily stood with the help of his war staff. Everyone cheered. Huzzah! Grand Magus Mandorf! Jules rushed to him, her face beaming with excitement. The real hero. He wrapped an arm around her. I couldn't have done it without Jules. They cheered again. Huzzah! Priestess Jules! She looked up at him with a broad smile. He kissed her temple, which made her eyes go wide. Let's see what treasure this beast fought so hard to protect, he shouted. An enormous, glowing chest appeared on top of the creature's smoking remains. Mandorf released Jules and approached the golden fortune. He gripped the handle and lifted it open.
Mr. Gregg,
said a whiny voice that was impossible to ignore. He glanced at Jules, tapped his ear, and sighed. She rolled her eyes knowingly. Impossible to ignore became impossible to avoid as the head and shoulder image of a toadish woman appeared. A small rectangular video, like old television, came into focus at the bottom right of his vision. His new boss, Luann, had spiky gray hair that grew from the top of her tanned round face like a chia pet. Her nostrils flared as she peered at him with sharp, beady eyes.
do not ignore me, Ian.
Her piercing voice would have made a bat wince and fly away.
You're 5 minutes late to the all-hands meeting. You know that all senior developers are required to attend.
Customer support issue, Luann. He swallowed his racing heart. Some players got stuck. He turned to Jules and mouthed, "Idiot."
I am not an idiot.
Luann screeched loud enough to make him jerk back.
You are grouped with others in a dungeon and not helping stuck players.
They were definitely stuck, he said with a broad grin. That's why I'm in a group.
Get here now,
She shouted, followed by some sort of dinosaur bird squelch as her image popped away. System messages appeared before his eyes. Achievement earned. First kill, Ars the Dark Golem. Achievement earned. Heroic endeavor. Yes, he raised a fist. excited to add these to his long list of accomplishments. Totally worth it. You were amazing. Jules was still pressed up against him. I was, but so were you. He bowed his head. We're a great team. Yeah, she said. She was so beautiful, he struggled not to stare until she frowned. The meeting? Right. He took a step back and began logging out. What about the loot? She asked. Oh, crap, he said, as his virtual reality headset went dark. Entriss Online by David J. Peterson. Available on ebook and soon audiobook.